Finally, several plotlines have converged together. Once again, Horikoshi is delivering some of the best story beats. There is a surprise Deku appearance, an insanely burned Dabi, and at long last, Sad Man's Parade. With all that being said, let's dive into chapter 374 of My Hero Academia, titled Butterfly Effect. Right away, we see the continuation of President Mike versus Kurogiri. Despite all odds, Spinner was able to wake up the Warp Gate villain. I must admit, I've been waiting for this moment for quite a while. The Kurogiri storyline has been prevalent since we learned who exactly the Nomu is. His identity as Shirakumo ties him permanently to both President Mike and Aizawa. Besides, All For One did say that he would be instrumental in winning the war. While Warp Gate is an insanely powerful teleportation quirk, it is hard to see it ending such violence. We have stated it before, but this conflict is a battle of ideologies. It is a true fight of good versus evil. Unfortunately, it appears that evil may be winning. President Mike can only watch on in horror as Kurogiri wakes up. His face is unlike what we've seen previously. Instead of two yellow splits in a cloud of purple, there is a distant outline of Shirakumo. Is it possible their childhood friend is still in there? I really hope we get that confirmation soon. Existing as he does now is almost like splitting. He is Kurogiri. He even proclaims a name, yet he was using the same language Shirakumo did. Plus, his appearance is physically changing to reflect his inner conflict. It is no doubt something that will come to head soon. But then without warning, we are taken to a weather broadcast. The sky is still covered in clouds, which seemingly resemble an eruption. They also don't look like ordinary clouds either. It is a mixture of normal clouds and something inky black. Could this be Kurogiri's quirk? Of course, we know how Warp Gate works. However, summoning a massive cloud was never part of it. Perhaps we are finally seeing yet another quirk awakening. Although, let's focus on the broadcast. The news forecast is led by a woman who kind of looks like Midoko without the animal characteristics. She talks about something called a flammagenesis cloud that suddenly appeared over Japan. For context, a flammagenesis cloud forms due to extreme heat or a volcanic eruption. So it requires a significant amount of heat. And so is it possible that Dabi's own will created these clouds? His quirk may very well be the only fire ability with that sort of punch. Either way, the Weather Woman does explain that if the clouds continue to grow and enter the jet stream, it could affect North America. To be honest, this revelation does remind me a bit of All Might, as we've seen the force of his blows have previously been enough to influence the weather. So it seems like we are getting some villainous spins on that. The meteorologist does explain why the clouds are there, but she claims it is due to multiple sources of heat that converge together with a tropical storm. When it is explained like that, it sounds more as if the entire Todoroki family caused it. We've seen Shoto's ultimate move, Endeavor go past his limitations, and Dabi overcome his destructive quirk. If this is the doing of just one family, that's pretty impressive. She furthermore explains that the cloud is said to be colossal, larger than anything we have seen, which sounds like a major storm system. And while she does give the weather, that isn't all she talks about. During the broadcast, she openly calls out All For One. The Weather Woman starts this lecture with a metaphor. She questions if a butterfly's wings in Brazil can cause a tornado in Texas, can't the same be said for Quirk Society? She wonders if the first quirk, the luminescent baby, has anything to do with the current chaos in their world. Were humans with quirks doomed from the start? It's an interesting question, but more so it feels like a reference to the Doomsday Quirk theory. After all, we've seen how destructive quirks are becoming with new generations. And on this channel, we even consider Shigaraki to be the poster boy for this theory, on account of his body having changed in such a dramatic way. But unfortunately, she does not elaborate further on her question. Instead, the Weather Woman proclaims, a single person's power can change the whole world. What I imagine to be a clear reference to All For One and One For All. Speaking of, she ends the broadcast by directly calling out All For One. She says that while the world's governments are bowing to him, she will not. She is outright opposing All For One, which is a very ballsy move, especially considering the position he has managed to back the heroes into with this chapter. We know he has associates overseas. By standing up to All For One, she is putting a target on her own back, as well as the news station itself. Yet the Weather Woman known as Meryl does not care. What she considers more important is standing up to those injustices instead of floundering and letting All For One run the world. Then we're taken back to the Dabi versus Shoto and Ida fight. The Kamino Ward has exploded into an oven. Dabi's quirk is overwhelming. It even causes a massive wave of heat around them. Burnin, who is somewhat retardant to fire, is overwhelmed by the flames. She wonders how Dabi can even produce this heat. Meanwhile, Ida begs Shoto to lead the fight. Both students look worse for wear, even despite the fact that Ida really hasn't done much. Ida worries that Dabi will burn Shoto alive, and it is a believable fear considering he almost did so during the last war. Besides, Shoto is physically exhausted. He has given it his all to defeat his brother, even pulling out an ultimate move, yet it still was not enough. Shoto realizes this too. He tells Ida that they can't stop fighting. Everyone is at their limits, but still continuing to fight. They surpass their own bodily limitations, and yet it still wasn't enough. While the heroes are there dying and falling to Dabi's hands, Shoto exclaims that Dabi is still standing. He is the only one there who still has the stamina and the will to continue fighting. His body has long since checked out, but his determination has not. Standing before them is a skeletal Dabi in a sea of flames. The landscape of Kamino is no longer a metropolitan area. It has been transformed into a hellscape. Amongst this ecosystem of fire, Shoto wonders openly. Father's blood courses through both our veins. So why is Toya still standing? The corpse-like Dabi is seen with the phosphorus X across his chest. He resembles his father, but is far more demented. This is the result of endeavor. Speaking of, Dabi thinks about his dad. He knows the flame hero is in Gunga Villa, which is a considerable distance away. Dabi curses this fact, commenting that the warping messed up their plans. Originally, Dabi planned to kill his brother and then bring his father the body. It's sick and twisted, but it is exactly what Dabi tried in the last war. But ultimately, Dabi knows his own limitations. His body is falling apart before his very eyes. Charred skin begins to crumble. We can even see it as bits of his own finger fall off. If his condition is anything to go by, Dabi isn't long for this world. He won't be able to accomplish his plan, so he does the next best thing. Using a move that is reminiscent of his dad's, Dabi begins to haphazardly fly away. Flames jettison out of his feet as he clumsily knocks into buildings. We have seen Dabi use this move before, but sadly, it is not something that is easy for him to do. Concentrating his firepower into his feet is hard. In fact, that is why he slams into the buildings around him. He cannot control such a pinpoint source. Burnin is amazed and horrified by the fact. Her face is uncharacteristically afraid. This is not a situation for her, for other heroes, or for the students with them. Dabi is an unstoppable force that they cannot fight alone. She wonders how he can even stand due to his body's composition. Meanwhile, Shoto shouts out he is planning to fly to where father is. Shoto demands to follow his older brother. He exclaims that he can still move, so he can still fight. He eggs his brother on, asking if the villain is going to run away and let him live. After all, Dabi is dedicated to killing him. Why stop now when he is so close? But just then, there is another development. Skeptic speaks through the spiky Nomu again. He tells the blue flame villain that he is getting a free ride. As suddenly, Kurogiri's quirk manifests itself in front of him. And of course, Dabi flies right into it. These developments are becoming insane. We are finally getting an endgame-esque setup. And with this, there is no doubt that other combatants will appear as well. It is something of a reverse Uno card against the heroes. This is to be an all-out battle. The chaos from other villains showing up will surely tilt the scales even more. That being said, the narration switches to the UA Flying Fortress. There, Monoma tries to keep Aizawa's quirk active. They are on borrowed time now because Manuel fears he can't keep up his quirk due to the wind. Without the moisturizing power of his water, Monoma would eventually be forced to blink, though the young hero refuses to give up. Despite the damage he may be receiving, Monoma confidently states that they've got to keep up the quirk. This fight will be in the history books, and Monoma wants to be remembered. It sounds like selfish reasoning, but he's also seen horrors. Monoma has had a front row seat to Shigaraki killing the heroes there, as well as actually murdering Bakugo. All the while, Monoma has been unable to intervene. Despite that, he assures the heroes that they can still win. Though this is not the main attraction, we see Deku again as he continues to fight Shigaraki. The ultimate evil is still inflated, his body a grotesque caricature of what it used to be. Is it possible that his quirks are overcoming Aizawa's erasure? Anything is possible, but Monoma still holds out hope. He says that he can't afford to blink and that Deku is still giving it his all. No one can afford to slack off or give up. This is the penultimate battle against the most evil villain in their society. It is their last stand. Meanwhile, Deku looks engulfed in rage. Granted, he is using it effectively. Instead of being overcome with anger like the last war, he is utilizing his feelings. It is a pinpointed, focused rage. There is not the chaoticness of losing himself. Instead, it is a weapon he will use against Shigaraki. But sadly, their fight is about to get much worse. All for One's words are heard as a warp gate opens directly behind Aizawa. The villain explains that people's experiences shape who they become. Not just that, but All For One trusts the feelings people create from their experiences. To him, they are probably the most raw, pure sense of self. All For One can feel is hate. He even groomed Shigaraki for that. So if anything, he really is a believer in the strength of emotions. That being said, the gate that opens shows a familiar headpiece and present Mike. Aizawa quickly looks to see the commotion, no doubt coming face to face with present Mike and Kurogiri. The ghost of his past and his good friend are both converging onto the same deadly battlefield. And on the topic of fighting, the point of view switches once again. This time it is to Gunga Villa. There, All For One talks about his plan and Spinner. He knows that Spinner's own feelings for Shigaraki were so powerful that it was guaranteed that he would succeed. Spinner was an outcast, and yet Shigaraki accepted him. It's a no-brainer that the mutant lizard would practically give his life for his first real friend, though it couldn't have been done without a little help. All For One explains that he developed a contingency plan. He knew he could still activate Kurogiri even without the recording. Why? Because the man who remains miles ahead of his adversaries decided to put a microchip in the hand Spinner carried. By the way, we do get confirmation that the hand is that of the late Shimmer Nana. It is a sick twist of fate. She desperately wanted to stop this, so much so that she gave up her own child. Yet here she is, quite literally, still playing a hand in it. But then, just as the heroes are focused on All For One and his speech, a warp gate suddenly appears from the sky. Dabi pokes his head through it, happily greeting his father. Endeavor looks exhausted, if not crestfallen. It's one thing to face the man behind Japan's villain problem. It's a whole other situation to be fighting his own son, who is near death. Unfortunately, Dabi is not alone. That's right, another familiar villain is with him. Through the portal comes two Twice clones. And it is likely that there is an entire army. Toga had Twice's blood, and it is clear she has already used it for Sadman's parade. Not only that, but one of the clones is holding Suyu's iconic goggles. The strap is free-flowing, which can only mean one thing. Both Su and Uraraka have been defeated. And hopefully this is something we will get a flashback on. Toga has wondered if her life still has value, and it is clear she hasn't gotten that answer yet. While I don't believe either student is dead, it is clear they have failed. Besides the army of Twices, there is also the fact that Toga is among them. To be fair, she is still young, and so theoretically, she can still be reached. But boy will that be a difficult task at this point. As the villains emerge, All For One states, "A sad man's death planted a seed of hatred in a young girl's heart." Clearly he is referencing the turmoil Toga experienced with Twice's demise. She completely unraveled, killing heroes without cause or reason. And now, she has turned her murderous grief onto Hawks. After all, he was the reason for Twice's death, and in her eyes, it was unnecessary. His death only proved to her that in the eyes of society and the heroes, villains' lives are meaningless, that they are at the bottom of the barrel, and Toga refuses to back down. All For One then reminds the heroes of what Hawks did. The blood on his hands. The dismay is written all over the winged hero's face as All For One asks him, "What would have happened last time if you hadn't disposed of him?" It's a taunt. An army of Twices is something the heroes cannot imagine defeating. Twice's double quirk was instrumental in taking down an entire city, so they are a force to be reckoned with. Not only that, but the heroes were low on manpower to begin with. They are already outnumbered without the influence of Twice. They cannot possibly stop such an army. Hawks realizes this and shouts out, "We have to kill him, now!" And with that, the stakes for My Hero Academia had been risen substantially. Hawks knows the danger of Twice all too well, but that, combined with Toga's desperate, angry nature, is a mighty weapon. Also, Toga is far superior to Twice ever was when it comes to physical combat, so this is a deadly combination. But with that, we have reached the conclusion of the chapter. I'm curious what you guys may be thinking in regards to how the heroes can make it out of this one alive. It is looking rough. Everything is against them right now. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna be more than hard. It's gonna be near impossible, at least given everything that we know and have seen thus far. But yeah, let us know what you can think of. My Hero Academia will actually be on break next week, unfortunately, so we will catch you a bit later on. But as always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.